Welcome back to Broadcast Row here at CPAC 2024. Andy Mangione on the AMAC Better for America podcast with a great guest, Mr. Jakielek, who is senior editor with the Epoch Times. Thank you for, this is not your first time that we've talked to you, and you've got a presence here as well. I want to thank you for taking time away from your interviews to join us here on the Better for America podcast.
Well, I'm so happy to be here with you.
You know, we were talking about newspapers. We're talking about the AMAC demographic. We put out a magazine every other month, and it is a tremendous asset for us. People want to know. It's one of, if not the only magazine that is increasing in circulation, according to our publisher. The people that print it out, they constantly tell us how the magazine, the circulation is growing as we add members, but they don't have another magazine like it. And if you look at our demographic, we're a 50-plus organization. They like receiving. They like receiving catalogs. They like receiving the newspaper. They like receiving.
Right.
They like receiving our magazine.
Right.
And we're talking. The Epoch Times is just, there's such wonderful content in it, and you guys are slugging it out every day, living and dying with subscriptions, just like it used to be.
That's right. Absolutely. No, it's incredible. You know, it's a funny because I'm born in the 70s, and already sort of my demographic. We were already people who got used to. I grew up with computers. My dad had them early. I was already tinkering with them. You know, frankly, in the end of grade school, definitely by high school, and I wasn't that into papers, right? But I moved to D.C. where I'm here at our Washington D.C. bureau, and I actually have the paper in my office, and it's actually for the first time I really sat down and started reading it like people used to, cover to cover. And it's an astonishing product. I mean, there's so much good material in there, right? I'll give you an example, right? So we're 5 days a week. That's the newspaper, and most Americans, we have about 500,000 print subscribers, okay, across America, every part of America, and that's a once a week product that comes out. It's kind of like what. I think you meant we talked about the Sunday Times or something like that. This is the paper I'm talking about, and it has shelf life. There's the top story I think was something frankly really bizarre that we discovered looking through January 6th footage. This is just this week, right? The cameras that are facing where the pipe bomb was at the DNC. Remember a lot of press around that. Well, around the crucial times, the cameras all around that pan away. Strangely, there's been a lot of things, but yeah. And this isn't a story that, it's kind of breaking news, but it's something that people need to know about.
Well,
right?
Absolutely. I subscribe. Full disclosure. I subscribe to the newspaper. I read the newspaper, and I read content there that if it's not on your website, I can't get anywhere else. And I'll give you an example. In a former life, I used to carry a bag, and I used to sell a statin. Statins are used to lower cholesterol. And I just read in the Epoch Times about how they are overprescribed and under-scrutinized. And the article was very telling with regard to, now that these drugs have been on the market for 20 years, side effects that are emerging with this widely prescribed product. Now, it does a wonderful job to lower your cholesterol, but it even called into question the tried and true direction that comes from the cardiologists with regard to, is LDL really a marker for heart disease? Is it really that important? It was fascinating. And that's not the only content that I'm getting here that just makes me stop and think.
Well, I'll just give you another example of amazing content. Dr. Paul Merrick, 500 papers to his name, one of the most published critical care physicians in the world. He got interested after he did COVID early treatment and suffered for that because it wasn't the thing you were allowed to do as, an illustrious, leader of a critical care ward and a giant big hospital. And so he, through the process of, basically suffering a lot, he thought to himself, my goodness, they're not letting me use treatments that might actually work because I'm innovative. I like to figure stuff out. Maybe there's other areas other than COVID that they're not letting me do this either. And he started looking into the deeply researched material around cancer, right? What papers exist out there about cancer that I didn't know about because they weren't part of the narrative, the kind of collective consciousness of what is supposed to be acceptable cancer treatment. He's found something like 1,200 papers now, and he's put them all into a book. And we've been, we similarly alongside him, we have this. I think you're suggesting we have this very cutting edge health section, which was one of the favorite for actually for decades now at the Epoch Times. This is one of our most popular sections, and so we have that information now. There's berberine as a treatment for diabetes. I didn't know that, right? Very effective, low, low side effects. Of course, do it with a doctor. I'm not that. But my point is, and for cancer, who would have known? Vitamin D, okay, omega-3 fatty acids, and a bit of exercise. Double-blind, randomized control trial, gold standard of test, good sample size. You can reduce your risk of cancer by 60%.
Incredible.
Right?
Incredible.
We could talk about more about Epoch, but it's astonishing what you can learn in the Epoch Times.
That's my point. And I have to bring up yet another article I read that really it bolstered my argument with regard to climate change and the volume of evidence that exists that kind of pulls the curtain on what the narrative is with what they're teaching in schools, and how zero or net is it net
net zero?
Net zero. That's it. Net zero would actually harm the planet, and it potentially destroy the planet. And it was laid out in detail in the Epoch Times. I'd mentioned to you off camera before we started this that I remember buying my first house in the late '90s, and my next door neighbor would get the Sunday New York Times, and would tell me, was astonished why I didn't get it. And I was, I realized I had my suspicions with the mainstream media back then, and would tell me it's like a magazine because you can't get through it with one sitting. You can read its relevance all week long. And when you and I were talking, it seems to me that today he's describing the Epoch Times.
I love hearing that. And I mean, I think we aspire to be what the New York Times should have been, right? I mean, I've been learning a lot about the New York Times history, and I sort of imagined it to be something I realize it probably never was, but perhaps we aspire to that same vision of being, the true paper of record, truth seeking at any cost. And I think our record stands for itself. That's like when most of your content, or the vast majority, unless you make mistakes, you make corrections.
Sure.
But if essentially everything ages well, as they say, that's a good standard.
That's a good standard, and that's the test of the content, and a true testament to the content that you've been producing. Has anyone tried to cancel the Epoch Times?
There have been a great many attempts, and these attempts actually started incredibly early, because we were actually founded by Chinese Americans. A lot of people don't know this, right?
Right.
But we were founded in 2000 by Chinese Americans to expose the Chinese Communist Party's, what we would call now fake news, right? It was really propaganda. And back then, actually our founder, John Tong, he was from China. He had come over after Tiananmen Square. He was in the student movement, right? In '89, they lost. Many people died. The smart ones, if they could, they got scholarships. He got one to Georgia Tech, never went back. And 2000 rolled around, and now the Chinese regime turned on another victim. It was the Falun Gong spiritual group. And they decided, well, how are we going to justify, basically eliminating a very popular group, right? Well, we know it's fake news, hate propaganda, and so forth. And this was, and a lot of American media were just parroting this regime propaganda as if it was, like reasonably sourced, right? And with some exceptions, I can think of some, but mostly it was like that. So they started this, John, now here in America, we have the First Amendment. We can do this. We can tell the truth about that situation. And that's how it started. And it started amazingly, right, in Chinese language in America, for Chinese Americans, but very quickly they realized, wow, there's a real need for truthful information. It's not just for the Chinese. It's not just about China. I would say like 7, 8, 9 years ago, the English kind of eclipsed the Chinese. We still have the largest independent Chinese language, both print media and TV media in the world. But it just became something much bigger than that, right? And it turned out that there's a lot of false narratives in the world that only some of them have to do with China. And this sort of deep commitment to truth, truth, tradition, hope. That's our tagline for a reason, right? And I think we've stuck with that. And again, I think our record speaks for itself.
Has the growth been steady? Have you seen surges? I know that. I mean, you're in a you're in an industry where newspapers are going out of business. Now, there's a reason for that, and it doesn't necessarily break my heart when a newspaper that has been less than truthful with its readership doesn't survive. It's, in my mind, good riddance.
We've
However,
been,
you're in a situation. It's in a growing situation in a quote unquote dying industry.
well, no, it's very interesting. I mean, I also have a belief, right, that just in general, sometimes we don't like to hear the truth as human beings, but ultimately we want it. That's what I think. I mean, sometimes it's very inconvenient. Sometimes you really don't want to know, but deep down inside, I think you actually do, because it's helpful. It helps you make good decisions about your life, right? And so I would say that it's very difficult. Okay, it's very, very difficult to imagine a situation like we're in right now, where just the fact that we're doing truthful reporting sets us apart so much that we grow just because of that. I mean, okay, I think it's great content, right?
Sure.
But I think, to be perfectly honest, I think a part of it is just simply because it's at least trying for the truth in this environment where there's so many media that have gone into what's so-called activist journalism, which is more what I call narrative enforcement journalism, as opposed to which is, there's other words for that, right? As opposed to truth-seeking journalism, which is what it's supposed to be in the first place, right? So I think we benefit from there being this real dearth of other players. There are some, and that, but
Right.
but certainly not in the newspaper space. Like that, actually, right now we're number 4 in the newspaper space. We've got New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and we're number 4.
In a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's by paid subscribers. So that's the other thing I'd say. People always say, "So how are you funded? Where's the dark money?"
Yeah,
all this.
right.
I mean, this is some of this cancellation attempts say, how could this possibly grow like this? It's dark money funded. We don't know where it's coming from. Weird political actors. Well, no, it's actually very simple. You can look at we're a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. You can look at our financial statements, and it's 90 to 95% these days individual subscribers, right? And that lets us stay very independent on the one hand, and on the other hand, it basically gives us this amazing base of people who are, I don't know, I guess increasingly spreading the word. Actually, this is something I should actually say. I ran into probably at least 20 people who have told me, one, I'm a subscriber, because they know that how much I appreciate that. But number 2, they would say, I'm telling everybody, I'm getting you more subscribers. That's what I encourage people to do.
Absolutely. Now, are there any plans to publish more than once a week? Anything in the near future?
So we do. So in DC, in LA area, Orange County especially, where we have a bit of a hot spot, in New York City, we publish 5 days a week.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of, it's almost a daily, right? But in terms of that national edition that goes out much broader, across all of America, that's a once a week. That's a weekly, and that's kind of like, it would be like that Sunday Times equivalent, right? Of the sort of deeper paper content that has more of a shelf life.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is all part of the reason has to do with the economics of it. We don't like to go past our skis, so to speak. We like to build with what we have.
Gotcha. Yeah. But there could be plans potentially down the road?
100%.
Oh, that's
I mean,
fantastic.
we're looking, certainly a lot of conservatives appreciate our media a lot. We've got a lot of so-called disaffected liberals as well, right? People that are, just sort of had that so-called red pill moment. Wow, that was a lie. What else is a lie? Well, they come to us. It's a very interesting growing group, but our whole purpose is to be a media for everybody. We're not here to be.
Exactly. You're just telling the truth.
Correct.
You're setting the record straight.
And we do. I mean, I do think tradition is in our tagline for a reason. We do have more of a traditional view of the world, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get the truth from us. You will, right? Because even if it's unpleasant, unfortunately.
My brother had a paper out when we were kids, and I would help him deliver the daily afternoon paper. And that, after years later, the paper went away. One of my favorite memories, and I kind of relive this memory when I read the Epoch Times, because it's the only newspaper that I'm reading.
Okay.
Are the ink stained fingers
Oh yeah.
The ink stained fingers when I'm
Yeah.
done turning those pages, and that I could take that newspaper with me on an airplane. It could be a few days old, and I still get the ink stained fingers, but gladly based on the content that I'm reading.
Well, I know I love hearing that because, like I said, I tell our subscribers, and this is why people come up to me on my, on my show. I often will tell people, you're our lifeblood. If you're a subscriber to the Epoch Times, you're our lifeblood.
I
That's
appreciate
a
that.
fact. So thank you.
No, we want to encourage every AMAC member, everybody watching this podcast,
Yeah.
to subscribe to the
Thank
Epoch
you.
Times. Please do. You're also, in addition to being senior editor, you are host of American Thought Leaders.
That's right.
You've done over 1,000 interviews.
Very close. I don't know if we're right around that.
Okay.
Right around that 1,000 mark right now. It's astonishing how quickly it's coming. These are not short. These are long, deep dives. Yeah.
So that show has been expanding as well.
That's right.
Have you? Go ahead. You're going to make a point.
Oh, I was going to say, just the last interview before I came to sit down here was actually with Liz Truss, former British Prime Minister, and and conservative, and fighting for conservative principles in the UK, and in a very difficult, apparently, situation where what we think of the administrative state here, big concern, like administrative state overreach. We hear about that. That is at a kind of a next level situation in the UK at the moment, just because of the way their government is structured. That's what she was telling me about. So that'll come out in the next couple of weeks.
Now tell our audience how often does is it a once a week with the American Thought Leaders? How often does it?
It's 3 times a week.
Okay, so you're busy.
So we got Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on Epoch TV, 9 p.m. slot, and it also there's sort of shorter versions on NTD, our sister TV media,
Sure.
if you pick it up that way.
I've had the opportunity to sit for NTD interviews at the Western Conservative Summit. They've been very gracious. American Thought Leaders sounds like a full-time job in and of itself, Jan.
It keeps me quite busy. Well, I should add, because on Saturday here at CPAC, I'm going to be up on stage with a Dr. Brooke Miller and a Dr. Robert Malone. And Dr. Malone and I, we just started a new show. We're about 4 episodes in, called Fallout together. We've been having conversations. We met through this, let's call it the COVID crisis. Saw we had some compatible views. Our private conversations are very helpful to both of us, let's say. So we decided, why don't we take those conversations and put them on camera finally for the benefit of others. So we have a new show called Fallout on Fridays at 9. That's once a week. So I guess I'm on now 4 times a week.
Whether you like it or not, right?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Dr. Robert Malone, just his background is a fascinating background, and I think I've read some of his columns in the newspaper with regard to the mRNA vaccine.
Quite possible.
He was the inventor of the mRNA. I can imagine that he's got some opinions on with regard to the vaccine and its usage and the mandates that people were forced to
the
take.
short of it is he believes that technology isn't there to be used in this way. I mean, that you could go into a lot more detail.
Sure.
But he's vehemently against the use of these products and people, given everything we know now. And that was an evolution for him too. Right. Like as for many of us, it wasn't something where on day one, you necessarily knew everything was going on.
I work for AMAC Action. That is the advocacy arm of AMAC.
Right.
And we like to think that we give our members the opportunity to become citizen advocates, to give them a platform to get their voice heard. What you're doing with American Thought Leaders and Fallout is giving other thought leaders and other people an opportunity, a platform to talk about issues that you can't find really anywhere else.
That's exactly right. I mean, I should get you to be writing the promos for the show.
No, but it's great. Now, I did want to pivot back to the Epoch Times. If people are all fired up watching this and they want to subscribe, how can they subscribe to the newspaper, and how can they access these wonderful programs that you're producing?
Just, go to theepochtimes.com, theepochtimes.com, and they'll be on the top right. You'll see the front page. You'll get to see, everything that we think is front page material that day. Mm-hmm. And go to the top right, and there'll be a little button that says subscribe, and you'll be set up. You can say, and generally, if you subscribe for Epoch Times, you'll also get Epoch TV. If you want Epoch TV, you'll also get Epoch Times. We always have some kind of offer. I don't know what it is today. They change it up, but there's always some kind of offer, because we love getting new subscribers, because that's our lifeblood. That's our business. Yeah.
Jan Jekielek, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you're just down the way a little bit here on Broadcast Row. taking the time out of your busy day interviewing and talking to people to sit with us to enlighten our audience about the wonderful work that you're doing at Epoch Times. And there's a great, our members are traditionalists. They like newspapers, and it's wonderful to have this source in the Epoch Times that's there for them to read the truth. So thank you very much. Continue success and best of luck with all your ventures as we move forward.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to sit down with you. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.